President Vladimir Putin has entered a paranoia-level isolation. They claim that he lives in a kind of glass bunker. Purges in the military, purges in politics. A parade next May 9th, which they say only 300 people from the general public will be able to attend. The rest will be invited guests and other people who are close or trusted. They say Vladimir Putin's isolation is so strict that physical appearances hardly happen anymore. When they happen, they're completely controlled. He is in the glass bunker, according to those closest to him. He has taken refuge in different bunkers. Even the people closest to him don't know where he is. The high security of Krasnodar has succeeded. Well, these conspiracies are confirmed at least by those closest to him, according to what they claim. He could be facing an internal coup or an attempted military coup, or maybe some other kind. Or is it all just in Putin's head? The European intelligence report reveals that the Federal Protective Service, the FSO, has regained full control of surveillance. Even the homes of his closest collaborators, even they have been banned from using the internet. Public transportation, his trusted staff, cooks, photographers, guards, all of them have been banned from using the internet. The leaked European intelligence dossier analyzed by CNN dated today confirms that this outlet, along with other American and European media, have been reporting on the analysis, the file. The European intelligence investigation file claims that we are entering a kind of transformation of power in Russia. A transformation from within, the shift from a secure autocracy to a kind of bunker dictatorship where orders are given from unknown places, completely fueled by paranoia. The technical trigger was the elimination of General Vasil Servabov in December 2025. That was the trigger. A trigger that exposed the vulnerability of the military leadership to Ukrainian intelligence. This event would have shown that the highest level of military leadership could be infiltrated and destroyed. Just imagine what that means in Vladimir Putin's mind. However, the real threat seems to be more internal. He is not so afraid that Ukrainian intelligence is within his inner circle, but rather he is afraid that this inner circle, the military leadership, might possibly be thinking about removing him, removing Vladimir Putin. The direct attack, for example, against Sergei Shogol, the Minister of Defense, who is now being pointed to as a possible epicenter of the coup. Imagine, his own friend. The former Minister of Defense could be one of those plotting against Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin can no longer trust anyone. If he has been plotting, it means that everyone could be plotting. No one, at least visibly, has been seen as loyal or as close to him. We have to remember that Vladimir Putin removed him from the Ministry of Defense and put him in another position. He's been a friend since their KGB days and since they were young. Sergei Shogol. Then, this suggests the gentleman's agreement among Russian elites has been broken. The Kremlin is turning into a nest of vipers where physical survival is the only priority. Surviving means not falling out of a window, not being poisoned, not being attacked or purged or taken to jail. Above the current war strategy regarding Ukraine, the main goal is to ensure their own survival, in other words, to exist as a regime. While things are happening in Iran, things are also happening in Cuba, in Venezuela, and in other regions of the world. Little attention has been paid to Russia's internal condition. History has shown that isolated and fearful leaders are paradoxically not only unpredictable leaders, but also leaders who are usually close to falling. In May, a series of interesting messages will come out. We'll need to watch what Putin looks like, if it's even really him to begin with. An internal civil war is imminent, obviously, meaning one that comes from within the very leadership, a political or military civil war. How exposed are the military leaders themselves to a possible plot? We have to remember that those who operate internally are not members of the military. In fact, they keep them far apart from one another, precisely so they don't plot. Besides, Putin has a very large security detail, one of the largest in the world. There are thousands of intelligence workers who are dedicated only to internal matters, to checking what people say and what they don't say. People close to him, in case of any suspicion of a plot, well, to basically destroy them. We have to remember that the Wagner Group itself tried to take power. A civilian paramilitary group, well, let's say more than civilian mercenary, right? And that tried to go against Putin and march on Moscow and push through everything, right? So, keep an eye on what's happening in Russia itself. The Kremlin is especially worried about the use of drones for a possible attempt to eliminate Vladimir Putin, which could come not from enemies but from members of the Russian political or military elite itself. That's where the current fear lies. Meanwhile, there is a European political meeting taking place right now in Armenia, and Zelensky himself says the following.
We must maintain this pressure and push Russia towards diplomatic channels. Lifting the sanctions is unacceptable. And I also want to thank everyone who is fighting against Russia's clandestine oil fleet. Because as long as the war continues, support for Ukraine must continue. Every support package is important, especially air defense. Any contribution to the Pearl program is also important. We need these packages, the Pearl packages, and they will help us protect ourselves against missiles. Ukraine can manufacture everything necessary to be able to defend itself in the future, to protect itself from ballistic attacks, from missile attacks. We offer Europe our drone technologies to unite all countries. On the other hand, do we really need good defense in Europe against drones and possible drone attacks? It must be guaranteed in the air, on land, and at sea. Joint production, joint defense, let's also move towards this. And one more thing, we need to focus on what we will do if Russia does not end this war. We must keep up the pressure, and we need peace. That's the most important thing. We must find a functional diplomatic format, and Europe must be at the table of any negotiation. We are in contact with the United States. We understand their vision and position, but it would be good to develop a single common European voice to engage in dialogue with the Russians.
Meanwhile, there is a forest of antennas in Vienna. Austria is another country that has discovered and dismantled a center of Russian espionage right in the heart of Europe. Just imagine what we're talking about, right? Let's look at the map and see where Austria is and why this move is so important, right? According to what we know right now, Austria has once again become, right? And I say again because it's not the first time there have been suspicions of some kind of espionage going on. It's been seen in different places. It's been seen in England. It's been seen in Germany. It's even been seen in France itself, right? Let's discuss what we know. Thanks to everyone joining the live stream. If you're just joining the live stream, just a reminder that here we update day by day what's happening in the world. Let me remove the measurements here and let's see what we're talking about, right? Let's zoom in on this part of the world. Look, Austria, where is it located? In the middle of Europe, right? Well, the incident is that Austria expelled 3 Russian diplomats after a sophisticated data interception device was discovered installed on the rooftops of their diplomatic mission in Vienna, in a wooded area of that region of the world. It turns out they were spying on the dense forest between the woods and the antenna, designed to suck up information from satellites and networks of international organizations like OPEC, the IAEA, the OSCE. That's what the source from the Ministry of State says. According to a report by the public broadcaster ORF, today, May 4th, they claim that Vienna is entering a kind of Cold War phase in which it has operated as the black hole of global intelligence, as they say there. Just imagine, that's where the black hole is. What does a black hole do? Well, it absorbs, right? It absorbs and absorbs. Well, They were right there in the middle of Europe, absorbing all the information possible. They claim that due to the deliberate legal loophole, the Austrian Penal Code only punishes espionage if it directly affects the interests of the Austrian state. This allowed nearly 7,000 undercover agents, pay attention to that, 7,000 undercover agents, to operate under diplomatic immunity. However, the detection of this mass surveillance hardware in the heart of the city points to a technical operation. Russia is no longer just after inside information, but is now seeking the direct interception of encrypted data streams from nuclear agencies and energy agencies. The very downfall of Egisto OTT, the former counterintelligence officer accused of selling secrets to Moscow, was the catalyst that forced Austria to break its historic neutrality. And to be able to shut spies out, because in the end that's what this had become, right? I mean, Austria had basically become Disneyland for spies, right? Besides, the place is very beautiful. Imagine yourself operating in Austria, enjoying the place, but at the same time, well, affecting it, right? To Europe and to Austria. The transformation of an embassy into an active electronic warfare node represents a violation of the Vienna Convention that escalates the tension between the European Union and the Kremlin. This is on a scale they say is unprecedented. If Austria finally closes the legal loophole that allows espionage against third countries, the architecture and intelligence in Europe will experience a shock. States, well, have witnessed how from Austria many of those countries continue to be spied on. It is estimated, just to give you an idea, it is estimated that out of 17,000 diplomats accredited in Vienna, 7,000 of them are actually foreign intelligence agents. So out of 17,000 diplomats, 7,000 would basically be spies. This is because of the legal gray area in Austria. So if you want to see real spies these days, well, go take a walk around Austria, and one of the people walking around is probably a spy, right? It's impressive, honestly, the way they've been operating, right? And many of them don't even necessarily live there, right? They might live elsewhere, but they operate from Austria because they know it won't cause legal problems there. Let's move on to other matters as well. Why not? Look, well, changing the subject, moving on to other interesting points about what's happening in the world. Thank you so much to those who are already sharing, those who are already here on the channel, those who are in the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to tell you that, well, your participation is extremely important. If you want to support the channel, you already know you can do it through a membership. You can do it through these types of formats, which, well, I really appreciate it, right? Thanks to you. Thanks to the community. That's why we can be here every day sharing the details, updating you live, and so on and so on. So, just so you know, we even broadcast from the very street where the news finds us. Right there, we go ahead and do the report, right? Let's move on to other topics, shall we? Other important matters as well. There's something that caught my attention, and that's this volcano that's been causing problems over in the Philippines, where evacuations have taken place so far. Around 300 families, and that's just today, right? Yesterday it was over 3,000 families, so it's been escalating, hasn't it? The level of risk is still present, mainly because of rain or let's say ashfall, right? The level of risk is still present at Mayon Volcano, which has been erupting in recent days. The explosion or the eruptions that have been happening have mostly released pyroclastic material, or so they believe. This is not the massive eruption that could happen in the near future, let's say, right? The ashfall was so thick that there was no visibility, not even on the national highway, according to what the mayor says. Caloi Baldo. By the way, that's the name from the municipality of Camalin, which is located near a spur of the volcano. The problem there is the people who live around the area who may be at risk, and besides that, well, the low visibility. The ashfall made visibility so low. Now it's calm again, but the danger is still present. It's been a very active volcano in the last 2 or 3 days, right? It's one of the most active volcanoes in that country, but we have to remember that the Philippines is full of them. The Philippines, Indonesia, this whole area is full of active volcanoes, right? Out of the 24 active volcanoes it has. This is one of the most active ones, but also in other dormant volcanoes, the authorities raised the alert level out of 5 levels around Mayan, going from level 1 to level 3. Alert level 5 already means that there is an explosive eruption at that moment and that you have to evacuate because you have to evacuate, but from level 3, evacuations are already carried out. Well, that's what's happening in the Philippines, but check this out, we still have a scientific prediction to cover. I'm going to tell you about it right here. Let's get into it. There's a very interesting climate prediction for 2026 from the scientists. We've talked about several groups, several universities, etc. that have been doing their own analyses. This time I want to tell you what the University of Columbia says with Dr. James Jason. Here we've talked about what NOAA says, what the University of Colorado says, what the United States Meteorological Service says. Even though it's also part of NOAA, they release their own report. So, well, let's get into the details of what is known. They've also made a finding and shared it with other scientists, so more and more information has been coming out. The WMO is still missing, which will also release its. They also regularly release their annual predictions and will update them. So we'll also have the WMOs here when it's ready, right? The most recent one. The anomaly is confirmed. The anomaly is the anomaly. The Super El Nino we've been warned about, which I've mentioned to you several times as an extraordinary event. It's not just a regular El Nino, it's a Super El Nino. Well, this would add to what we're already experiencing, what they call anthropogenic global warming. What is projected for 2026 is that it will be on average the hottest year ever recorded in history. The thing is, and what these scientists are saying, is that it's not just on a global level. It's different depending on the place. For example, we've had an unusually cool year here, as I've mentioned. I mean, it's already May 4th, and in the mornings if you go out you still need to wear a light jacket, but it's cool. This isn't normal. We just have to remember that. Well, climate isn't measured locally in this case. Estamos platicando. It's measured globally, by the global average, and there are other regions that are warming faster, especially the farther north or south you go, the more accelerated it is. The closer it is to the equator, the less accelerated it is. It's a topic that, well, there are still theories about it, but it really draws a lot of attention. That's part of the balance. Maybe you don't see points, but the key indicator is that the current sea surface temperature is 0.13 degrees higher than the levels before the 2023 cycle. This suggests that there is a global temperature jump of about 0.06. What does this mean? According to Dr. James Jensen from Columbia University, and this is a report that will also be updated soon with the WMO. We'll see, since the WMO will consider this report. Well, we are facing the convergence of the most dangerous factors in terms of the natural variability of the ENSO system. What is the ENSO system? Well, El Niño. It's the El Niño phenomenon. El Niño is the southern oscillation, and it's losing its ability to provide relief, whereas in past decades, the El Niño phase offered thermal relief. Current data shows that even under its influence, temperatures remain dangerously close to record highs. Dr. Hansen even warns that climate sensitivity has been underestimated in traditional models. This implies that the system responds more violently to greenhouse gases, but more than expected. If the intensity levels are compared to the 1997-1998 event, we will not only be facing extreme heat, but a radical alteration. That's what the report says. I mean, I'm not adding anything. I'm not saying no, I'm not adding absolutely anything. It doesn't say that. If the intensity levels are compared to the 1997-1998 event, we are not only facing extreme heat, but a radical alteration. Patterns of humidity and drought that destabilize agricultural production and marine ecosystems in an, it says, irreversible way. In other words, the famous point of no return. This phenomenon is not only analyzed statistically by meteorologists, but it is also a catalyst for a cascading crisis in which, by 2026, it is possible that the famous 1.5 threshold will be surpassed. That is the threshold of the so-called point of no return. And that's what I'm saying. It's a theory, right? But they believe that once you cross that point, there won't be a return anytime soon, right? But instead, the climate will just keep escalating, so to speak, right? He says this margin is wide enough for us to be willing to make predictions. Look at what he says, right? I mean, it's like what we're seeing is solid enough, so to speak, that 2026 will be the warmest year in history. That's what he believes, but that's not his prediction. He says, of course, 2026 will be even hotter, right? I mean, like they say, 2026 and 2027, just forget about it, right? That's Dr. James Jason. James, it's actually Dr. James Hansen from Columbia University, the one who released this update. Ah, well then. We'll see what happens, but the warning is to be cautious and say, look, I was thinking. Build a little house, whatever it is, because everyone should think. I think now about the thermal aspect. Now think about that. Think about adapting to more extreme climates. Be very careful. Don't build in areas that could potentially flood. We have to start thinking about that now, right? If you live in risky areas, you should start thinking about what would be better, you know? Obviously, always do your own research and analyze it very carefully. But obviously, it's a topic that should be taken into account, and I think everyone should consider it when deciding where to live, where to be, and how to adapt to these kinds of things. In the end, that's what it's about, adapting to potential extreme climates. And look, if nothing happens this year and everything stays calm, that's great, but it's better to be prepared, and it's not just one report. The issue is that multiple reports already confirm or suggest this is heading that way. Direction, so to speak, not a direction with, let's say, challenging weather. No, it's not like that either, but it's a challenge that needs to be taken into account. So keep that in mind as well. Now, on a different note, it's being reported. I can't show the image beyond this point, but it is circulating on social media. At this moment, there is that small plane. A small plane that apparently crashed into a building in Belo Horizonte. In fact, you can see how it falls. The small plane falls, it crashes. No, it impacts. 2 people died, the pilot and the co-pilot. That's what is known. It really catches my attention that if you're already collapsing, falling, you would head toward an area with buildings. No, that situation really catches my attention. It's not something that's usually reported. Let's look at the data. It says the small plane has a single engine. It crashed into a building in the Silveira neighborhood in Belo Horizonte. A shout out to the people watching us from Brazil, leaving 1 person dead and 3 others. It says here 1 person died. All right. It says 1. And the others say 2. But anyway, let's stay alert to see what gets confirmed. But at least in this report, it says so. That it's 1. It would be very hard for me to believe that anyone could survive there, but anyway, the small plane crashed in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. It left 1 person dead, according to reports, after the single-engine plane crashed. Well, after the single-engine plane crashed into this building, it says. According to preliminary reports, the small plane had taken off from Pampulha Airport in Minas Gerais, and after circling several times, it ended up crashing. If you had the ability, you would go. Well, I don't know. I find it very curious whether the plane was an EMP 717 model.
Fabricado en 1979, sin embargo, alrededor de las
The pilot reported problems 6 kilometers after takeoff.
Se sabe que el avión
It had permission to operate and was owned by a company.
de Teófilo Ottoni, sin embargo,
He couldn't operate as an air taxi. Well, all right, thank you. I know, I was curious, and the plane that he had crashed into a building. There's talk of 1 person dead, 3 people seriously injured who were taken to Yao 23 hospital. Well, it's an interesting topic. All right, let's go to the comments. How have you all been? How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me for a little while in these live streams we've been doing, because I've seen several of you here, right? Thank you so much for being here, for commenting. We started really early because of, well, early like we usually start, so greetings. Elicia 19, that's what it will be. Good afternoon, Jalisco, Nueva Galicia, he says. And Nuevo León will be the east of Jalisco like Spain. What? That's like comparing it to Spain already, or how it is. It says here in the Golden Cage, Spain, it says, greetings, Eliseo, how have you been? Give it a like and join. Thank you very much. Hey, if you help us with that, we really appreciate it. Justa says the next versions and lots of success from Ecuador. Big greetings to Ecuador. How are things over there? Thank you very much for joining us. Bayo says, good afternoon, Pepe. Greetings to Astrid. Thank you very much for informing us today. Thank you very much to you too, Bayo. Greetings to Armando as well, wherever you are. Greetings, Armando. Hello. Someone says it's only pausing for me. Let's see if someone can let Mercedes know. Look, at least for me, it's not showing any dropouts. I'm not seeing any dropouts, but let me know if any of you have a report out there. It seems like there are no losses at the moment. 0% loss. So, well, at least on this side, no. But I don't know if it's on YouTube or if someone else is having a problem. Hi, Mercedes. How have you been? Greetings all the way to Tijuana. It says here we're still always listening and sharing positions and ways. Thank you so much, Nicoli Franco. Huge greetings. It says all the way to Spain, to Andalusia. It says, Abelson says, greetings from Sweden, Pepe. I love listening to your news with your harmonious voice, especially at this hour when it's 10:15 p.m. Awesome. Abelson, thank you so much for your comment. I really appreciate it and send a huge greeting all the way to Sweden. How are things going over there? How are those issues Sweden was dealing with? Well, apparently things like security problems and stuff like that. I hope they have improved and that this has been resolved. Greetings. He says it was sad, important to see him leave or to have to leave because of his own situation, according to this note. I mean, how? What will that final day be like? Let's say for this character. Well, Leonardo, how have you been? Big greetings to Argentina. Well, anyway, we keep reporting in detail wherever we are, whether it's here or out on the street. We'll be there telling you the news about what's happening in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Warm regards. See you later. Goodbye.